Britain, average rainfall 3 inches a month. The average family gives off 12 litres of water every day. Our homes are under siege from damp. There's one man who spent years searching for a true case of rising damp.
In the last 9 years, I've not found a single case of rising damp in any of the properties that I've tested. I've tested literally thousands of properties. I certainly have never found a true case of it.
Mike Parrett grew up in a damp council flat in South London. Now he works for Lewisham Council, fighting damp.
He was, well, one of us. So he knew what was like coming up and living in a council estate and how it was for people and as for tenants. So he had a first-hand knowledge of it all.
Mike himself used to inject houses. He had to do something to sort out the damp.
You can imagine how cold and damp they were with one, maybe an open coal fire only in some properties. Had horrendous problem with damp inside properties.
Then Mike began toying with a radical theory. He put it to the test on the ground floors of the Beckenham Hill estate.
Mike believed it wasn't rising damp. He always believed there was a condensation problem because of bad windows and bad heating. But by putting heating into the properties and new windows with vents and fan kits, it's proved the point that there is no problems up there anymore.
Mike had stopped the damp without having to inject expensive damp-proof courses. The money he saved paid for other homes to have central heating. He began to wonder whether injections were ever needed. He's never done one since.
He spread the word, which has been proven time and time again in people's properties.
But Mike's a rare voice. Surveyors are constantly diagnosing rising damp, even in his own backyard, Lewisham. Today there are 8 such cases. Could they be his first encounter with rising damp?
It's been diagnosed as requiring chemical damp-proof course injection because the property has been diagnosed by an outside chartered building surveyor as suffering from rising damp.
Have you been to this property before?
No, this is the first time.
Careful on my word.
Mike's a sort of damp detective. He follows the clues to find out where the damp's coming from. It only needs an injection if the damp's rising up from the soil, through the brick, and through the existing damp-proof course. Most surveyors rely on one piece of equipment to diagnose it. Mike thinks that's where the mistake begins.
This is a standard electrical moisture meter that most practitioners use, and
I'll just put it into the skirting, and you can see we're already getting a very, very high reading here.
How does the reading work? What is it?
here you can see that the red dot is showing that this wall is 100% saturated. But of course what we don't know at the moment is whether the dampness is purely on the surface or whether the dampness is deep into the brick wall. And that is fundamentally why this instrument can't be used solely on its own.
Clue number one then. Very high readings on the moisture meter. Trouble is, it's not just damp that sets it off. Anything that conducts electricity does.
Now this is quite incredible because this is one of the classic problems that we find. This is actually a foil, and that foil will completely mislead the electrical moisture meter into believing that we have a 100% saturated wall, i.e. rising damp. And my guess is, it doesn't take any stretch of the imagination as to why the practitioner here has come to the conclusion that this is rising damp.
So, silver foil set off the meter this time, but maybe there's damp behind the wallpaper, deep inside the wall. That's where Mike needs to go to. It's supposed to be the home of rising damp. A sample from inside should provide Mike with his second clue. Is there really any damp?
This takes about 3 or 4 minutes to calibrate, and we're already getting a reading here.
About 1.5.
1–1.5% is a fairly normal moisture content in a state of dryness. This is not actually wet.
But now you've got a small amount, just a tiny amount now that you want to find out where it comes from.
Exactly.
Mike's such a professional, even though there's only a hint of damp, he wants to test where it's come from. If it's damp from the soil, that elusive rising damp, the chemical will turn bright red. If it's damp from tap water, it'll turn yellow. That's not rising damp at all, and that requires a very different remedy.
What we've actually got here is a presence of moisture which has not originated from the soil, but is very likely to have originated from tap water. And if you look at the...
So, once upon a time, some tap water found its way into the wall, probably from a leaky water main in the space beneath the floorboards.
And they laid the water mains directly...
Anyway, it's not there anymore, and it certainly doesn't need an injection. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm convinced. I mean, before we came along here, this had been diagnosed as having rising damp, and now we know all it really needs is a bit of redecorating. So, no rising damp, no injection needed, no big bill. Oh. Mike's council reckons he saves them £160,000 a year. He went on to test the other 7 properties on his patch, diagnosed as needing injections. Guess what? He found no rising damp there either. In this case, the clue couldn't have been more obvious. A concrete plinth. It's drawing the moisture up past the original slate damp-proof course and back into the wall. In the jargon, it's bridging.
Well, my. This plinth is bridging this damp-proof course pipe.
The cure? Certainly not an injection. Just remove the concrete. And to be safe, you could lower the path to stop rainwater splashing up the wall.
Just have a look at this, because I want...
Here's the surveyor who wants to inject it.
Right the way through into the
Mike wants to talk him out of it, but he might be too late.
To inject. That's rather a pity.
Well, no, actually, no, they haven't. No, what they've done is to take the plaster off. I don't think we've actually started.
They've actually started drilling.
Oh, right.
They've actually drilled right the way through the breeze blocks here, which aren't even in contact with the ground. So they're obviously just going to inject everything in their path. What I really don't want to happen in this property, there's absolutely no necessity. It just doesn't need chemically injecting. And certainly the breeze blocks don't need chemically injecting.
That's right. Well, not that arrangement, no.
But Mike can't convince the surveyor, even after showing him the plinth.
Testing all along that wall. And again, we follow the... I just don't think it does need it, but... I just don't think it needs it at all. And I've tested probably, must be in excess of 1,000 properties now over 15 years, and I've never found the necessity yet to put a chemical damp-proof course in. Not one.
Not one?
Not one. And all those dwellings...
Some people are going to be very upset with you.
No, I don't think so. I mean, all those properties are occupied, and I've had nobody report to me that they're living in damp conditions.